We live in a time when nearly everything is available with a single tap. Information, entertainment, social interaction, all delivered instantly. Humanity has never had so many tools, so many choices, and equally so many distractions. And yet, strangely, we have never felt so drained or uninspired. This widespread sense of apathy, affecting millions across the globe, is often misinterpreted as laziness, a lack of discipline, or even some kind of character flaw. But what if this interpretation completely misses the point? What if the real issue isn't the absence of motivation, but the overwhelming flood of stimulation that suffocates any chance of truly connecting with ourselves? That is the argument many modern thinkers have put forward, an idea that resonates strongly with the teachings of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. Frankl lost his entire family in Auschwitz and spent years surrounded by hunger, cruelty, and the constant presence of death. Yet, in the midst of this horror, he discovered a source of strength that didn't come from pleasure, comfort, or even hope for liberation. It arose from something far deeper, meaning. Frankl believed that human beings are fundamentally driven by a will to meaning. What sustains us is not the pursuit of pleasure, ease, or status, but our ability to assign significance to our lives, even in the harshest conditions imaginable. This perspective sheds an unsettling light on our current reality. If true motivation grows out of meaning, what happens when an entire society becomes conditioned to pursue only pleasure and distraction? What becomes of the human mind when every moment of boredom is instantly patched with a video, every pause filled with a notification, every silence drowned in noise? This video invites you to consider a different possibility. Maybe you're not unmotivated. Maybe you're simply exhausted. Exhausted from chasing goals that aren't yours. From consuming endless content that enriches nothing. From living in a constant state of distraction. In this context, lack of motivation isn't a flaw. It's a warning sign, a signal that something essential has been lost in the noise. The human brain was never built to withstand the relentless overflow of stimuli that defines contemporary life. Across thousands of years, our minds evolved to operate in natural rhythms, alternating between activity and rest, focus and wandering, engagement and introspection. But in just a few decades, everything shifted abruptly. We entered an age of hyperstimulation, where every gap of quiet is immediately replaced by alerts, glowing screens, artificial noises, and an endless stream of information competing for our attention. Moments that once were simply time to breathe, reflect, and exist are now perceived as inefficient or wasted. Technology, instead of serving as a tool for awareness, has often become a numbing agent for our inner life. We scroll through infinite timelines not because the content matters, but because silence feels unbearable. We binge-watch shows, consume short-form videos, and devour rapid-fire news, not to learn or grow, but to escape. Escape from what? From ourselves. This constant avoidance comes with serious consequences. Dopamine, the chemical tied to pleasure and motivation, is triggered repeatedly through small bursts of digital stimulation. But these bursts are superficial. The more we chase them, the more desensitized we become to the natural joys of life. Things that once felt fulfilling, a deep conversation, a meaningful project, a peaceful walk, begin to seem dull. Our brain, hooked on novelty and instant gratification, forgets how to appreciate what is gradual, profound, and truly significant. This is the hidden core of modern demotivation. Easy pleasure destroys real motivation. When every opportunity for stillness is replaced with a quick digital reward, we lose the capacity to desire in a meaningful way. It's not that you don't want to improve your life. It's that your reward system is being hijacked by stimuli that imitate achievement without providing any real substance. Which raises a disturbing question. If we are constantly running from boredom, aren't we also running from the deeper questions of our existence? Silence, once the birthplace of insight, has become something we fear. As Viktor Frankl warned, modern individuals have less time to reflect, less courage to choose, and less inner freedom to discover personal meaning. What becomes of a mind that is never allowed to rest, never permitted to be quiet, never given the chance to simply exist without stimulation, without demands, without constant distraction? The result is straightforward and devastating. The mind fractures. A mind overloaded with nonstop input does not truly think. It reacts. It does not contemplate. It consumes. And gradually, it loses one of its most vital capacities, the ability to reflect. Reflection is far more than thinking. It is stepping back and observing. It is giving thoughts space to settle, emotions room to form, values a moment to surface. It is in this internal territory, this quiet, spacious place, that we build identity, understand our experiences, and reconnect with what genuinely matters. But when every moment is interrupted by a new notification or a new stimulus, that inner territory is eroded. In its place emerges a frantic, anxious mind incapable of sustaining deep reasoning, much less a search for purpose. An exhausted mind doesn't crave clarity, it craves relief. And this is exactly where the danger lies. Because a mind desperate for relief becomes dependent on anything that offers a quick escape. Social media, excessive food, pornography, compulsive shopping, overworking, anything that numbs discomfort, even at the cost of long-term well-being. This is the trap. Excessive stimulation prevents deep thinking, and the absence of deep thinking traps us in repetitive, empty cycles. Worse yet, an exhausted mind loses connection with itself. Without moments of introspection, we stop recognizing our real emotions. We don't know what we want. We can't identify what truly inspires us. We become puppets of external impulses, living by what is suggested, marketed, or imposed, instead of what arises from within. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote that the deepest form of despair is choosing to be someone other than oneself. But how can anyone choose themselves if they never stop long enough to meet themselves? A mind that cannot reflect becomes alienated from its own essence. And this alienation fuels what we call lack of motivation. When we are disconnected from our values, emotions, and true intentions, any action feels forced and hollow. Motivation is not something that appears magically. It is the natural result of inner connection, and that connection requires silence, space, and pause. Viktor Frankl taught that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and within that space lies our ability to choose, and therefore our freedom. But what happens when that space is gone? When life becomes automatic reaction instead of conscious action? We often hear confessions like, "I feel stuck. I can't get anything done. It feels like something is draining me from the inside." These are not simply expressions of frustration, they are symptoms. In a world obsessed with productivity, performance, and constant output, feeling unmotivated is quickly labeled as a personal flaw, as if something inside you has broken or disappeared. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if this so-called apathy is actually a sign of a system that has become sick, and of a soul gasping for air beneath layers of superficiality? Within this context, demotivation is not weakness, it is resistance. It is the suppressed cry of a psyche that can no longer pursue meaningless goals, imposed expectations, or stimuli that promise fulfillment but deliver nothing but emptiness. It is the silent collapse of someone who has spent too long living outwardly, never turning inward. It's not that you don't want to take action. It's that you are exhausted from acting without purpose. It's not that you lack strength. It's that your energy has been drained by trying to fit into a life that doesn't reflect who you truly are. Apathy reveals a painful truth. We attempt to create movement where meaning is missing. We try to ignite our inner fire with artificial fuel, and the soul always knows. It feels when something is hollow, when there is no authenticity, when we're merely performing a role instead of living a truth. That's when paralysis emerges, not from incapacity, but from disconnection. Imagine a plant forced to grow in depleted soil, illuminated 24 hours a day by artificial light. Can it survive? Perhaps. But it will grow fragile, pale, detached from its natural rhythms. This is what happens to the human mind immersed in nonstop stimulation and endless demands, without the time or space to root itself in its own being. Demotivation in this case is the body saying, "Stop." It is the soul saying, "Return home." Frankl warned us precisely about this. When a person cannot find genuine meaning, they distract themselves with pleasures. But distraction is not fulfillment, and when the emptiness inevitably returns, we realize the issue was never lack of movement, but lack of direction. What we need is not more productivity, but reconnection. And this leads us to the heart of Viktor Frankl's philosophy. The man who survived the darkest chapters of history to teach us a truth many forget. Real motivation does not come from comfort. It comes from purpose. During one of the most catastrophic chapters of human history, Viktor Frankl endured the monstrous reality of Auschwitz, Dachau, and other Nazi concentration camps. He witnessed the collapse of dignity, the erasure of identity, the reduction of human lives to mere endurance, families torn apart, names replaced with numbers, bodies starved and beaten until survival itself became an act of defiance. And yet, amidst this abyss, Frankl noticed something extraordinary. A few individuals managed to preserve a spark, not because they were physically stronger or more fortunate, but because they held on to a why, a reason to keep going, a purpose that transcended the suffering around them. This realization became the cornerstone of what Frankl called the will to meaning, forming the foundation of his therapeutic approach, logotherapy. Contrary to Freud's claim that humans are driven by the pursuit of pleasure, or Adler's belief that we are motivated by the desire for power, Frankl argued that our deepest impulse is to find meaning in our lives. When meaning is absent, an inner void emerges, the same void that today we try to mask with distractions, compulsive productivity, and endless streams of stimulation. Frankl's most striking insight was that meaning can exist even in pain. Even in the harshest conditions, a person can choose dignity, resilience, and inner freedom. Life never ceases to have meaning, he insisted, even in the face of unavoidable suffering. This directly challenges modern assumptions. We believe we must feel good before we can act, that motivation is something to be waited for. Frankl flips this completely. Sometimes it is through purposeful action that strength returns. Meaning is not a luxury, it is a psychological necessity. If motivation depends on meaning, then a lack of motivation is not a flaw. It is a disconnection from what truly matters. And this disconnection grows when we live for superficial goals, status, validation, appearance. Frankl invites us to ask a different question. What am I living for? Not how do I get more energy, but why is this worth doing at all? As he famously wrote, he who has a why can bear almost anyhow. In a world terrified of slowing down, silence has almost become a forbidden territory. We treat quiet as a threat, an unwanted confrontation with the very thoughts we try hardest to avoid. Yet silence, this empty, unpolished space, holds one of the most transformative powers we still fail to understand. It is not absence, it is invitation. Modern life has conditioned us to fear emptiness. A few seconds of waiting feel unbearable. Being alone feels unsettling. Pausing feels wrong. But what we call emptiness is often the doorway back to our own consciousness. It is the only environment in which the mind can finally settle, breathe, and reveal what has been hidden under layers of noise and expectation. Frankl understood this deeply. Before we can respond to life, he said, we must first listen. But listening has become a lost art. We absorb floods of information, opinions, and demands from every direction, yet remain deaf to the quiet voice within, the one that whispers instead of shouts, that appears only in the thin space between one thought and the next. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. It exposes what stimulation numbs. Doubts rise, buried hurts reappear, unanswered questions surface. But discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is evidence that something real is finally being given room to exist. Silence strips away the unnecessary. In the dissolution of noise, the essential emerges. Turning off the phone, declining another task, refusing to drown your mind in distractions. These acts may seem small, but they represent a rebellion against the automatic patterns that have kept you disconnected. At first, the stillness feels foreign, even hostile, but slowly, clarity takes shape. Values long forgotten surface. Authentic desires, once suffocated by constant stimulation, begin to breathe again. Silence is not emptiness, it is preparation. It is the foundation on which meaning can be rebuilt. Before aligned action comes honest listening. Before purpose comes the courage to confront what you've avoided. And before motivation returns, there must be space for your inner world to speak. There comes a time when moving through life on automatic pilot becomes impossible. A point where the inner emptiness grows louder than any distraction, where exhaustion refuses to be soothed by another video, another scroll, another task added to the list. This threshold, the moment of rupture, often feels like collapse, yet it is far more than that. It marks the turning point, the instant when searching outside ourselves finally stops and the long-neglected journey inward begins. True motivation is quiet. It doesn't rely on inspirational hype or perfectly packaged systems. It doesn't come from trying to satisfy expectations or conform to goals imposed from the outside. Instead, it rises the moment you reconnect with what is non-negotiable within you, your deepest values, forgotten aspirations, and the parts of your identity that no amount of distraction has been able to erase. This type of motivation is subtle yet unyielding. Once awakened, it reshapes the way you move through the world. And contrary to popular belief, it doesn't require dramatic reinvention. It begins with something as simple as reducing the noise, with looking at yourself honestly, with admitting, even quietly, this no longer belongs in my life. It begins with the gentle act of interrupting the frantic external chase and redirecting your attention inward. Because it is inside that space, not in productivity hacks or endless stimuli, that purpose begins to take form. From that point on, your actions shift. They stop being driven by obligation and start emerging from meaning. They stop coming from impulse and begin to flow from intention. You don't act to escape discomfort. You act to express your truth. Demotivation, then, is not a personal defect. It is an invitation, a signal that it's time to step beneath the surface and reconnect with what is real. A sign that you need silence, presence, and intentionality. Viktor Frankl survived the unimaginable and returned with a truth that applies to every human life. Everything can be stripped away except the last freedom, the freedom to choose our attitude, to choose our path. That freedom is still yours. The question is, what will you choose from this moment forward? There comes a moment when the mind, pushed beyond its limits, simply can't endure another layer of noise. A moment when constant stimulation, once a refuge, becomes unbearable. When every scroll feels empty, every notification feels intrusive. Every attempt to distract yourself only deepens the feeling that something important inside you has been neglected for too long. This point of rupture is not weakness. It is clarity breaking through the overload. In a world obsessed with productivity and relentless activity, feeling unmotivated is treated like a flaw. People assume something is wrong with you, that you lack discipline, energy, or ambition. But demotivation, in many cases, is not a malfunction. It is a message. A sign that your inner world has been suffocated by expectations, endless stimulation, and goals that never truly belong to you. You are not incapable. You are disconnected. This exhaustion is the consequence of living externally for too long, chasing validation, absorbing the world's demands, constantly responding, never pausing to breathe or listen to what you actually want. What we call lack of motivation is often the psyche refusing to continue a life lived on borrowed desires. It is the soul whispering, "This is not your path." That whisper grows louder when the stimulation never stops. The mind that is constantly bombarded loses its capacity to reflect. It becomes reactive, fragmented, dependent on anything that promises quick emotional relief: entertainment, food, social media, compulsive busyness. These escapes offer temporary comfort, but deepen the long-term void. This is why the collapse comes, not as a punishment, but as a protective mechanism. As Viktor Frankl observed, when a person cannot find meaning, they drown themselves in pleasure, but pleasure without purpose eventually turns into emptiness. Modern life amplifies this cycle, pushing us to chase artificial rewards while silencing the deeper questions that truly sustain meaning. Demotivation, then, becomes a protest, a refusal to keep moving without direction. It invites you to stop forcing yourself into roles that don't fit, to stop numbing your inner call with endless stimulation, to stop mistaking exhaustion for failure. This is not the end of your motivation. It is the beginning of your reconnection. Because once the noise collapses, you can finally hear the truth you've been avoiding. You are meant to build a life anchored in purpose, not overstimulation. Because it is in this internal space that something long buried finally has room to breathe. When the noise fades and the constant pressure dissolves, what emerges is not laziness, nor weakness, nor failure, but truth. A truth that had been overshadowed for years by expectations, distractions, and the frantic pace of a life lived outward instead of inward. This moment of rupture is frightening because it forces you to confront what you've avoided. But it is also liberating. It is the threshold where your real life begins. In the absence of stimulation, the mind slowly regains its capacity to feel again, genuinely, deeply, without filters. You start noticing what drains you and what nourishes you, what aligns with your values and what betrays them. The difference between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. This clarity does not arrive as lightning. It arrives as a gentle but persistent pull toward authenticity. You begin to realize that the exhaustion you carried was not a sign of incapacity, but of misalignment. You were not failing. You were forcing yourself into a shape that did not belong to you. A role, a rhythm, a life that demanded constant self-abandonment, and the psyche eventually refuses to continue. This is why the collapse becomes a doorway. It breaks the illusion that more stimulation, more productivity, more effort will fix the emptiness. It reveals that the remedy is not acceleration, but alignment, not pushing harder, but listening deeper. As Viktor Frankl taught, meaning is discovered, not invented. It is uncovered through honesty, through silence, through the courage to face your own soul without running away. And once this meaning begins to resurface, even faintly, something extraordinary happens. You no longer seek motivation. Motivation begins to seek you. It arises naturally from the clarity of your values, from the recognition of what matters, from the small yet powerful decisions that realign your life with truth. This is the beginning of authentic change, not the frantic change born from desperation, but the grounded change born from purpose. And in the final part, we will explore how this inner recognition transforms into action, into direction, into a life that no longer needs stimulation to feel alive. Because once you rediscover meaning, you don't need to chase motivation anymore. You become it. Once meaning begins to resurface, even quietly, something shifts inside you. A subtle internal alignment takes place, and from this alignment, action flows differently. It is no longer forced, frantic, or fueled by guilt. It becomes intentional, rooted, honest. This marks the true turning point, The moment when you can no longer return to the life you lived on autopilot. The distractions that once numbed you lose their appeal. The routines that once kept you running in circles now feel hollow. The constant search for the next hit of stimulation no longer satisfies. You begin to see that the emptiness was never a personal flaw. It was a message. A signal that you had drifted too far from yourself. And now, for the first time in a long time, you feel the pull back home. Real motivation does not appear as a burst of adrenaline or a sudden wave of excitement. It emerges as a quiet certainty, the certainty that some things can no longer be ignored. Certain habits, environments, and expectations simply do not belong in your life anymore. Certain voices must be silenced so your own can finally be heard. Transformation starts with small acts of truth. Turning off the noise, refusing what drains you, choosing what aligns with your values, taking a single step in the direction that feels real. These steps may look insignificant from the outside, but internally, they are seismic. And in these small movements, you reclaim your agency. As Viktor Frankl powerfully asserted, everything can be stripped from a person except the final freedom, the ability to choose their attitude and their path. No matter the circumstances, this freedom is still yours. Even now, even in exhaustion, even in confusion, you can choose to interrupt the cycle. You can choose to reclaim your inner space. You can choose to act with intention instead of impulse. When you do, the world stops feeling like something that happens to you and begins to feel like something you participate in consciously. So ask yourself, what will you release starting today? Which noise will you silence so you can finally hear your own voice again? Because this is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning, the moment where you step out of superficiality and into a life built on purpose, not pressure. And if this message resonated with you, continue forward. The path of meaning unfolds one honest choice at a time. If this video has made you see things differently, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you next time.